Welcome everyone. This is the first pre-recorded video on geology of wells. So we will continue with the discussion that we have been having in the last class, and let us go ahead with the discussion on the active petroleum system. Okay. So we were talking about the different elements that we will require in the uh, in the active petroleum system, and the elements are the presence of a source rock. So the source rock, as we said, is a shell which has enough total organic carbon, and then which is subjected to some sort of temperature because of burial, and it expels hydrocarbon. And then you need a reservoir rock, and that reservoir rock is where the hydrocarbon is stored. You need a migration pathway through which the hydrocarbon essentially migrates from the uh, source rock to the reservoir rock. And then we need a cap rock, and that cap rock stops the further migration of the hydrocarbon or leakage of the hydrocarbon from from the reservoir uh, further upward. So it stops the vertical migration. And then we need a trap. That the trap is essentially used to stop the lateral migration. So the hydrocarbon has to get trapped under the structure. We talked about timing, that the trap development must have happened before the hydrocarbon essentially expels out, and then maturation, that the source rock need to have in that particular temperature for a number of million years, or number of a significant amount of time, so that the hydrocarbon can expel out from it. So it is important that all these elements are present in a conventional prospect to make it a success. Okay. Please remember, we are talking about here conventional. I have put them under inverted commas, that they are conventional. This is a conventional petroleum system. What does that mean? That indicates there are some unconventional petroleum systems where you will perhaps not need all these elements to be present. Okay, but in a conventional system, you must have a source rock, you must have a reservoir rock, must have a cap rock, a trap, migration pathways. There must be good matching in timing, and there must be enough maturation of the source rock. Okay. Now let us look into source rock in bit more details. So what are the rocks that can form source rocks? They could be organic rich shell, can be carbonate, can be merl, or it can even be coal. In petroleum geology, source rock refers to the rock which from which hydrocarbons have been generated and or are capable of being generated. Okay. So a particular shell, a particular carbonate, marl, or coal from where hydrocarbon has already been generated, or it can generate hydrocarbon. That is what we call as a source rock. What are the typical depositional environment? Deep water marine environment can create a source rock. Lacustrine environment and deltaic environment can create such source rock where we have enough total organic carbon to be built up. Okay. Now, the type of source rocks depends on the kerogen. Okay, so kerogen is essentially is the organic matter present in the source rock. Okay, depending on the type of kerogen, depending on the type of the organic matter present in the source rock, we can subdivide into three categories. And this is a very particular type, a very important classification, and often you can expect questions from this classification. Okay, and this classification is based on the hydrogen to carbon atomic ratio in that particular kerogen to the oxygen to carbon atomic ratio in that particular kerogen or in that organic matter, and they are generally subdivided into three types. Type 1, which is called sapropelic kerogen; type 2, which is called lipid rich kerogen; and type 3, which is called humic kerogen. So the sapropelic kerogen comes from the algal matter. Okay, if the algal matter is present in your source rock in abundance, we will call it a type 1 or a sapropelic kerogen rich source rock. If there are phyto and zooplanktons present in the contributes to the TOC, significantly contributes to the TOC of the source rock, then we will call it a lipid rich kerogen or a type 2 source rock. And if the source rock's TOC is contributed by land plants, we call it a humic kerogen. A humic kerogen or humic kerogen or a type 3 source rock. Okay, so humic kerogen rich source rocks are called type 3 source rocks. Okay. Now, what we observe here essentially is that with increasing hydrogen by carbon ratio, with increase in hydrogen by carbon ratio, we see that the potential of oil generation is enhanced. Okay? The potential of oil generation is enhanced. So what it means, so the sapropelic kerogen is best if your total organic carbon is rich in sapropelic kerogen, then you will probably generate more oil than gas. Okay? So more hydrogen to carbon ratio means better oil development in the system. Okay. Similarly, so you can see here the sapropelic kerogen has the maximum potential to generate oil, uh, and the type 3 kerogen, the type 3 source rock, which is rich in humic kerogen, has the least potential to generate oil. Okay? And type 2, which is the lipid rich kerogen, is somewhere in between. Okay? So the first thing is the presence of kerogen or the presence of organic matter in the source rock. Okay? Now, it's not enough to have only the source rock in the only the kerogen or the organic matter in the source rock. We will further need that particular temperature in that system to be present. Say, for example, if my source rock is buried at a depth of 1 kilometer, 2 kilometer, okay, say for example, one to 1.5 kilometer, there will be some gases coming out from the kerogen, but that gas is biogenic gas. It's not abundant in quality, abundant in quantity. Okay. So biogenic gases do generate because of the working of the bacteria on such kerogen. Okay. So this do not generally come out because of the cooking of the source rock. This generally comes out because of the act of bacteria on the source rock. Okay? And this is related to the diagenetics stage of sedimentation or rock formation, lithification. Okay? This is related to the diagenetic stage of lithification, and the typical temperature associated with the development of biogenic gas is like 30 to 60 degrees centigrade. There is something called vitrinite reflectance. We will just discuss it in a while. Okay. Now, from 60 degree to 150 degrees centigrade, the rock formation process is called catagenesis. In that time, we start seeing the development of both oil and gas. More particularly, from 90 degrees centigrade to around 150 degrees centigrade, we see the development of oil. Okay? At an around 120 degree centigrade temperature, we see that it's called a oil peak. This temperature is called an oil peak, and this is the time when oil generation is maximum. So we have to bury our source rock at a depth between 3 to 5 kilometers, where the temperature will be around 90 to 150 degrees centigrade. Okay, and we will be in the catagenesis process of lithification, and that is when we will see the development of oil in the system. Okay, and this 120-degree being the peak of the oil development. Okay, so now this 90 degrees centigrade to 150 degrees centigrade, which corresponds to 3 to 5 kilometer of depth, is called oil window, with 120 degrees centigrade being the temperature where peak oil generation takes place. And you can see along with oil, there is a little bit amount of gas. But after 150 degrees centigrade, we see more development of gas. So the development of oil kind of stops, but we still continue the development of gas maybe up to 180 degrees centigrade. But if it goes beyond 180 degrees centigrade or sometimes 200 degrees centigrade, then your source rock is burned. So you cannot expect a source rock which is sitting at a depth of 10 kilometers to produce hydrocarbon. Okay, it has to be between 5 to 6 kilometer depth. Okay, so 3 to 5 kilometer is ideal for the development of oil, and that is what we call as oil window with 120 degrees centigrade around where peak generation of oil takes place. And then you can see here this is thermogenic gas because this comes by the cooking of the material. Okay, this is no more due to uh, bacterial activity. Okay, now I give you a source rock in the laboratory. How would you find out what type of temperature that particular source rock has gone through? Okay, whether that particular source rock has generated oil or gas, or it is actually has not matured enough. Okay, below, say for example, it has not suffered a temperature below 60 degree, above 60 degree, or it has gone way beyond 180 degrees centigrade. How would you know? So what would you do? You will take out these kerogens from that source rock and you will study them under reflected light microscope. Okay, so what you are doing now, so you have the source rock, yeah, and then you separate kerogen and then look under reflected light microscope. And then what you can do, you know, you can find out a very specific type of, for the timing, let us say, a very specific type of component of kerogen, which we call as vitrinite. What is vitrinite? We will understand more while we discuss coal. For the time being, you think that this is a part of the kerogen, okay? A part of that organic matter, which we call as vitrinite. And then we measured the reflectance. Reflectance means we are looking under reflected light microscope. Okay, so here is my vitrinite. We are looking under reflected light microscope. Okay, this is just a part of this total kerogen. Okay, and we have put some light inside, some intensity of the light, and then some intensity of the light actually comes out. Okay, and you can calculate what is the reflectance of the vitrinite. Okay, and then and that is what we call as VRO or vitrinite reflectance index. Okay, vitrinite reflectance index. And that vitrinite reflectance index will provide you a clue of whether that particular source rock has been matured enough or not. If the vitrinite reflectance index is less than 0.5, you say this is perhaps not matured enough to create any oil or any thermogenic gas. If it is between 0.5 to 2, yeah, you will say yes, it is perhaps well within the uh, catagenesis window. And if it is around 1.2, 1.3, then you will say, yes, this has maximum chances of creating oil and gas, okay, more like oil, right? So say, for example, I analyze the source rock and I find that it contains type 1 kerogen. It is a type 1 source rock, or it contains sapropelic kerogen. And then also I find that it has a reflectance of around 1.2, 1.3. Then I will say that this source rock that we are looking at under observation now has the excellent potential of creating hydrocarbon. Okay, because of two reasons. One, it has very high hydrogen to carbon atomic ratio in its composition, because it belongs to the sapropelic kerogen group, and this particular source rock I can classify as type 1 source rock. And then also from the vitrinite reflectance analysis, I can talk that it has suffered enough maturity, but not more than enough maturity, so that it can actually be right within the oil and gas window, and it has excellent potential to be cooked. And perhaps it has got cooked with an excellent potential that it had already expelled oil and gas. Okay? So that is how you will characterize the source rock. Okay? So in a nutshell, uh, the source rock is generally from where the hydrocarbon is generated. Yeah. Stratigraphically, it generally sits deeper than the reservoir rock. It is generally made up of shale, carbonate, marl, coal, but most likely shale. And we can subdivide it into type 1, type 2, and type 3. Type 1 being the most prolific one to generate oil. And then we study the vitrinite reflectance to find out whether it has enough maturity to form oil or gas, uh, and whether it is well within the oil window. All right. So now let us look into a reservoir rock. So now, so we have simply characterized right now this source rock, and then the source rock from where the hydrocarbon is expelled, and then the hydrocarbon moves up and finds the reservoir rock. Okay. Now let us see what are the typical characteristics that a reservoir rock must have, so that we can call it a good reservoir rock. Okay. So a reservoir rock can be a sandstone, it can be a carbonate, it can be a tuffite. Tuffite is essentially volcanic ash. It can be a fractured basalt. It can be coal. It can be shale. You see, basalt doesn't have its inherent porosity or permeability. Okay. So if you want to induce porosity and permeability into it, then you have to essentially induce secondary fractures into it. You have to fracture the rock. Then if you fracture the rock, then you will perhaps have some porosity and permeability into the system. So, as we said, the reservoir rocks must contain certain parameters. For example, porosity, permeability, net to gross, and hydrocarbon saturation. In today's class, I will only discuss about porosity, and then in the next class, while we interact, of course, we will keep on discussing the rest of the parameters. Okay. So, porosity is the percentage of void or pore space compared to the whole rock volume. Okay. So if the total volume is Vt and the volume of the pore space, so this is the pore space. So these are the grains, and as you can see, um, there is space. This blue colored area indicates the space between two grain. Okay. And so if you calculate the volume of the void space and then divide by the total volume of the rock, then I will get a number which is porosity. Okay. And say around 30 to 40% porosity. 40% is actually excellent porosity in a reservoir rock. If you find like 20 to 30% porosity in a reservoir rock, then you say it's a very good quality reservoir. Okay, because it has good porosity into it. Now, what you also observe that the porosity decreases with depth. Yeah, and why such thing happens? Suppose no. And we will talk about stresses later on, of course, but then for the timing, you think about it that suppose I have a rock which is very much at the surface. Sorry. I have a rock which is very much at the surface and suffering the least stress. Okay. Hence, the rock is relaxed, and we observe that the space between grains is more open. Okay. Now, if we are at a depth, what we observe that this stress is intensified, and we'll read why such stresses are intensified, and you will find that the porosity is reduced. The pore spaces, if the rock is more compacted, hence the porosity is reduced. Okay. And that is exactly what you observe in this graph. You can see here porosity is plotted with depth, and then first porosity kind of decreases uh, linearly with a uh, you know the dip. Initially it decreases fast, and then it is kind of constant. Okay. With depth it doesn't change a lot, simply because then you have compressed it enough. You cannot compress the rock anymore. Okay. And this is essentially can be found out by an equation. So phi, porosity at a particular depth, is equals to phi 0, porosity at the surface, or porosity at a particular depth, multiplied by e to the power minus kz, where z uh, e stands for the depth, and k is essentially the compaction constant. Okay. So this the bulk modulus of the rock. Okay. Now this typical curve essentially is called the compaction curve. So it says that the porosity is maximum. Porosity decreases with depth, but after a certain depth, you generally observe that it doesn't change any value. Now, well sorted material have higher porosity than similarly sized poorly sorted material. Okay. Say for example, you will learn what is poorly sorted, what is well sorted later on. Okay. So for the in your sedimentology class, of course, but for the timing, let me just give you a brief. Say for example, I have a sandstone where I have uh, grains of all sizes. Okay, large, medium, small, all together, and this is called a poorly sorted sandstone. Okay? SST means sandstone. Okay, poorly sorted sandstone, because there is no sorting. Everything is together. Okay? So what happens in this case? Say for example, if I give you a box and ask you to pack these grains, what you would do? You will first perhaps put the larger grains, then you will put the medium sized grains, and then you will put the smaller grains. Okay, like packing a box. So what happens if it is poorly sorted? The intergranular space granular space in so the sorry, write it here, is reduced, right? Now, if I give you a sorted sandstone, what is a sorted sandstone? What I will observe in a sorted sandstone, though, that I will have the larger grains here at the bottom, perhaps, okay? And then the mid-sized grains are in the middle, and then very fine grains are at the top. Okay? So this is a very well sorted sandstone. Okay, and say for example, if this is the direction of younging, I mean this is older, this is younger, then this is what we call a fining upward sequence. Fining upward sequence. Okay. Now it can be the other way around. If we find the coarser grains at the top and then the middle-sized grains, the mid-sized population, and then the finer grain. Okay. And this is the direction of younging. Okay. Then we will call it a coarsening upward. Whatever the case is, both of them are well sorted. Okay. They both are well sorted. And you can see if my sandstone is well sorted, what we will observe that the intergranular space is maintained, okay, which will lead to the development of porosity. Okay. So if my sandstone is well sorted, I will find better porosity. And then the porosity will decrease with depth. The porosities can be of two types. One we call as primary porosity, the main or the original porosity in a rock, which forms generally due to the deposition of the rock. And the secondary porosity, a subsequent separate porosity in the system, often enhancing the porosity due to chemical leaching of minerals of generation of a fracture. Okay. So let me just explain this to you very briefly. So I have a piece of rock, and then these are my grains. And here, this is my porous space, right? This is my porous space. This is my porosity. And this porosity is developed because of the deposition of this rock, right? It is developed due to deposition. So hence we call it as primary porosity. Now, after the formation of the rock, suppose I create some fractures in the system. Okay? Some fractures in the system. These are my fractures. So that will also create some void spaces, and hence I will call it as a secondary porosity. Not only fractures, what else? Say, for example, I am looking at a carbonate. Yeah. In carbonate, we sometimes find leaching or karstification or formation of void. which are not essentially due to the deposition of the carbonate, are not related to the deposition of the carbonate, but they are imposed after deposition, yeah, post deposition phenomena. They can also provide you secondary porosity. Right? So we just simply uh, summarize reservoir rocks. It could be sandstone, carbonate, tuffite, fractured basalt, coal shell. Okay. The percentage of void is represented by porosity, and then this is generally associated with the number phi. You put phi to represent porosity. Porosity decreases with depth. Well sorted sandstone has better porosity. Porosities are of two types, primary and secondary. Primary is the original porosity present in the rock, and the secondary porosity is the imposed porosity by means of karstification or generation of fractures. Okay, so there are other parameters which will define your the property of a reservoir rock. We will talk about them. They are like permeability, net to gross, and hydrocarbon saturation in the next class. Okay, so if you have a question, we will of course take them in the next class, which will happen on Monday between 5 and 6. Um, but if you you know uh, see this video, and if you have a burning question, you can always write to me or drop the question in the WhatsApp group. I'm happy to answer that as well. All right, so I'll stop it here, and I will see you on Monday. Thank you.